Matter of fact, I'm going to refer to a couple of newspaper articles in my introduction here. That's how I got sort of hit between the eyes with the topic. One particular article, as it concerns artificial intelligence, had this headline: Ex-Google executive Anthony Lewandowski is founding a church where people worship an artificial intelligence god. Now, it goes on to say in this article, in a rare interview with Wired, Lewandowski shed more light on his new church, Way of the Future. That's the name of the church, and here are highlights. Just two. Way of the Future Church will have its own gospel called The Manual, public worship ceremonies, and probably a physical place of worship. Also says the idea behind his religion is that one day, not next week or next year, sufficiently advanced artificial intelligence will be smarter than humans and will effectively become a god. Now, I hope I've got your attention, okay? Another headline I saw, this one actually from the Daily Mail out of the UK. Headline was, Why Humans Will Happily Follow a Robot Messiah. Religions based on artificial intelligence, or AI, will succeed because we tend to worship supreme understanding. And in this article, they state that the same drive that compels people to believe in religions will also work for artificial intelligence. This article states that people will eventually rely on a robot messiah to solve society's problems. Article says this is because we have a tendency to worship supreme understanding. And then it says last month a former Google engineer formed the world's first church to follow an artificially intelligent being, which is the first headline I referred to minutes ago. So will the world follow a robot messiah? Now, obviously, there are some potential eschatological or end-time significant elements in all of this. The religion known as Way of the Future claims our species can better itself by following the instructions of a robot that is, get this, 1 billion times smarter than humans. I do know that computers today are challenging the IQ and intelligence of humans. Whether or not they're going to become 1 billion times smarter, that's highly up for debate. How does this fit into an end-time scenario? Doesn't Daniel 12 talk about an increase in knowledge in the last days? What about the reference in Revelation to an image of the beast, even the mark of the beast? Could artificial intelligence be involved in these things? I'm going to head into the interview process at this time. And my guest for the next two programs is going to be Pastor Billy Crone. And joining me in some of the quizzing is my co-host, Eric Barger. And let me just say, before I bring them on, because I think Pastor Crone has brought up a fascinating angle that I'm going to ask him about in a minute, because he said to me that he feels that just as there was a milestone event in 1948 that changed the world, that would be the rebirth of Israel, we may be going through that again in real time, right now, the birth of artificial intelligence, and that will be a game changer for the last days. Pastor Billy Crone, welcome, and Eric Barger, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jan. It's always great to be on.
Well, I think what we need, gentlemen, is a definition of artificial intelligence, because I've got some quotes here. Some are saying that he who develops AI, artificial intelligence, will rule the world. One expert says we are summoning up demons. Another says we're playing with fire. Another one says this is one of the dumbest things we can ever do. We won't be able to control it. Pastor Billy Crone, give us a definition.
Well, a definition is basically creating an electronic brain. And with the aid of computers and databases and massing amounts of information, that you basically create an alternative to human intelligence. It's just a computer version. However, this version is not just artificial, it supersedes man's intelligence beyond our wildest dreams. And that's the concern that people have today. It's not just creating again, electronic brain that can mimic man's brain, but go way above and beyond. And at that point, how do you control the thing?
So you feel then that the artificial intelligence can, in fact, supersede man's abilities, knowledge, reasoning, etc., thinking, the whole process?
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people need to be aware of. Artificial intelligence is not something that's coming. It's already here.
Yep.
And that's the bombshell. You know, if you look at the history of it, it's nothing new. Ultimately, from a biblical point of view, artificial intelligence, trying to create your own God, that's the lie of Genesis chapter 3 from Satan, that you will be like God. And it's the same thing being, if you will, to use the term resurrected today in the last days, that people think that they could achieve their own immortality, they can become their own God, they can link themselves to artificial intelligence, become God themselves, or other people just are happy to submit, like you opened up with, and worship this false computer-generated deity. But it's nothing new. It's been going on throughout man's history. You look at the Greeks, the Egyptians, even in the Middle Ages, there was talk about trying to get mind into matter. It really began to take off in the 40s and the 50s with, of course, the advent of computer technology to really go beyond discussing an electronic brain and AI, but begin to build it. And then from that point, you had major colleges around the world who began to develop this technology, and it's been going that way for decades. In fact, if people are familiar with the term called a Turing test, this was back in the 50s, and that test was developed by a guy named Alan Turing, who created a test to determine if a machine could think and carry on a conversation that was indistinguishable between a conversation with a human being, and hence it would be artificial intelligence. So it's been around for quite some time. The government's been on this for quite some time around the world, not just the United States. This is kind of interesting. Back in the day, and this again was in the 50s, there was a government agency called ARPA, A-R-P-A, and they began pouring big-time money into this field of artificial intelligence. Now, what's interesting is ARPA is the same entity who developed what we call today the Internet. Back then they called it ARPANET, but today we call it Internet. And ARPA is now, they changed their name to DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, who is developing a lot of this AI technology for the military. But it went beyond the United States. It's gone over into, of course, overseas, the Japanese, Europe, just pretty much every country in the world is working on it. And if people just look at their news, again, AI is not just coming. AI is already here.
Yeah.
And one of the big promoters of that is an entity called Sophia.
First, I want to play a quick soundbite. I talked to Jack Hibbs last weekend on air, and I'd like to play that clip and then have us comment on that.
The most famous woman in Saudi Arabia, her name's Sophie, is not a woman. She is a robot. She's the most famous woman in Saudi Arabia. Sophie's her name. She's a robot. AI in creation. We've got people now, you can put on socks, electronically motivated socks, hands, goggles, headgear, bodysuits. I can't get too graphic. I'll just say that you don't need another human being in your life anymore with the advent of artificial intelligence, conversations, relatability, you name it, it's now happening. The young generation relates more to what is false, to what is imaginary, to what is made up. They communicate efficiently. Listen, I've had young people tell me, this is tragic, regarding artificial intelligence. They can get their answer from Google faster than they can get an answer from God. Yeah. They don't need to pray.
They don't need to pray. Of course not.
They don't need to pray, Jen. They just ask Alexa for the answer in their own home. They get instant response. They don't see the need to bow the knee. They don't see the need to talk to an invisible God when they have a God, lower G, in front of them. This creation, like all gods, man-made gods, this creation tells you what you want to hear. It sanctions what you want to do. It not only allows you to do what you want to do, the young generation loves it because it does it in Technicolor, 3D, 4D, technology. Listen, church cannot compete with that, Jan. The sermon cannot, a youth group cannot compete with that. And yes, I do believe. Remember, the Antichrist, the false prophet, is going to hand over to the Antichrist an image. This image has been given power to speak and to look and to discern who's got the mark, the numerical value, number that gives them worth with a prefix, 666, and then whatever number follows after that. To the young generation of 15 to 25-year-olds today, that is a brilliant idea, makes perfect sense, and they're looking for it.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. We're talking for the hour and next weekend as well on a fascinating subject called artificial intelligence, AI.